or, street strip guys, but I just look at the crowd. I can't help but feel good about the sport of drag racing. Have you guys seen some of the photos that were posted from Houston Raceway Park this past weekend? I mean, there was like a near capacity crowd at that joint on Saturday, and it's just massively impressive, and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good that the sport is succeeding on so many different levels, right? We beat the Street Outlaws No Prep Kings thing to death. We talked about the crowd that was on hand, jaw-dropping crowd at the NHRA National event at the Gator Nationals. And then I go, man, these guys are racing Lambos and Audi R8s and all these exotic cars, and
if
the
you're
stands
a
are packed full of people,
though,
man.
you can go there. It's like a one-stop shop, right? I mean, you get to see a little bit of everything.
Yeah, true.
And some exotics that you probably never will see anywhere else.
There was a Lamborghini that went 233 miles an hour. Yeah, there was a lot of carnage.
You won't see them again.
Yeah, you're not going to see them again. A lot of them got wadded up, man. What's your take on that?
There's a lot of talk about that.
Yeah, we're going to see some changes on that deal because it was pretty eye-opening.
I had an interesting conversation with Seth Angel, the owner of Houston Raceway Park on Monday. And I called him on Tuesday because I want to give him a little bit of time to decompress from what I'm sure was a rough weekend at
his wall
the
back in
office.
place.
Yeah, man. He mentioned it's kind of funny because not funny that anybody crashed, but he felt like this is par for the course. Like he goes, man, this event is still in its growth stages. Like this whole scene is still in its growth stages. And I think people fail to, remember that, there was a time when pro mods wrecked pretty much every time they went to the starting line. We don't see that so much anymore. It wasn't that long ago that every NHRA national event that featured a pro mod included a crash, an oil down, something bad, something dramatic.
Because they put safety measures in place afterwards.
Well, and
right?
it evolved, right? It just evolved and gets better. And he pointed to that, like, hey, man, we're early in this process. Like, it's not, Texas 2K has been around for a while. It's not, it's not in its infancy, but the cars are getting faster. Everything is kind of escalating rapidly. And he just made the point that, hey, man, I feel like some of this stuff is just growing pains that we're having as this event gets more and more serious. Plus, another point that Seth made is that there are people that don't race all year long. 51 weekends out of the year, they're not racing, they're doing something else, but they've got a car that they're building for this weekend. And that's another thing that I feel like drag racing has lost. There's only a couple of those events. The one that always stood proud to me was the World Street Nationals at Orlando Speed World Dragway, right down at Ozzie Moya's joint. Before Ozzie Moya, Carl Weisinger hosted the World Street Nationals. And there were people, you would go to that event and see cars that you didn't see anywhere else or any other time, because a bunch of guys pooled their resources, got together. I've got a car, you've got a big block Chevy, I've got 74 bottles of nitrous or a screw blower or whatever. We'll all contribute and we're going to the World Street Nationals. And it was more about, it was this Super Bowl thing that everybody worked towards. That's what they have right now with the Texas 2K event. That is an event. Most of those cars won't see action anywhere else. If they do, it's very limited. Everybody kind of saves their stuff for that. And that's what he pointed to. He goes, man, there are shops here.
We saw that
years will be built around the success that happens here. Like if their cars go out and set all the records, they're going to be busy all year long. So they're going out there, leaving nothing on the table. Everybody's stuff, if the dial goes to 10 at Texas 2K, you're turning it to 11 or 12. And when you have that kind of environment, you're going to have some carnage. I definitely think it went over center, obviously, and it was...
I think a mandatory single parachute could solve 90% of what we saw out there. Don't you think?
Well, but I think it's also drivers that don't, and I don't mean to be negative.
We saw this.
Yes.
We've been to these events before. We've seen guys that have too much money and not enough experience, and they can't even back their fucking car in to the water box. Like,
you know what? I'm going to give a huge...
I mean, they went right over the top of cones and everything. I mean, it's just amazing that they...
I would love to see one of these events. There's a couple of takeaways I have for it. Seth Angel, and I hope this isn't like proprietary information. He goes, but I'm going to tell you, he told me this. He goes, I can take all my ticket sales. He goes, I have a lot of information about my NHRA ticket sales, and I have a lot of information about my Texas 2K information or ticket sales. He goes, there is zero overlap, like zero. These are two completely different groups of people. So the first thing that flies into my head is going, man, how does the NHRA or how does traditional drag racing get their arms around this thing? Because there's this huge us versus them. There's this huge divide, right. Two different worlds, and maybe you can't mesh them, but man, I can't help but think that a guy who's spending $400,000, $500,000 on a twin turbo Lamborghini with a billet Pro Line motor in it that runs 200 some on, he could certainly go pro mod racing. Like, can he run with Stevie Fast? Doubtful, right? But he could be, I mean, that kind of investment, if he knew there was an opportunity, he may not even know it exists, right? When you think about the fact that these two ticket buying audiences, there's no overlap, that's a head scratcher for me. But I do think that the thing that could happen that would be positive is to see one of these events work with like someone like Frank Hawley, right? Maybe pay whatever it would take to bring Frank in and, hey, we're going to have a driver seminar on Thursday that's mandatory. If you've never raced with us before or what, I just think there's some ways that we could leverage they always say, and this is a funny one that I enjoy using a lot, right? They say experience is like the best teacher, right? Have you heard that before? Like, the best way to learn something is to do it yourself, trials and tribulations. And it doesn't have to be your experience, right? We can learn from other people's experiences, right? And a lot of people resist that, but there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, if we didn't do that, there'd be a whole lot more accidents and dead people and tragedies and whatnot, because we do learn from the experiences of others. And I think that if somebody could come into that scene and offer some of that knowledge, because to counter your point on the parachutes, Mike, I don't know that everyone that's driving these cars that are going over 150 miles an hour know that that's a great way to save the car if it's starting to move around.
Well, not even just to save, just to slow
stop
down.
it. Yeah. I mean, they don't think they have to.
The majority of the problems that I saw were just simply slowing the car down and just totally preventable. But
and also how to use the brakes on your car. Do you even know that your car's got carbon fiber brakes on it? And if you mat this pedal, they're probably going to get hot and lock up, right?
I think wasn't it crazy conditions there too? So it was cool.
Good conditions.
I think it was windy a little bit. Also,
big crosswind.
And again, don't write it off just because of that one event. Let's see what happens. But I think there's more eyeballs
for a while too.
No, I know. I mean, but just it's the start of the year. There's more eyeballs on that series right now too, or on that race. Yes. I feel like there was more talk, regardless of the crashes, about that event this year. We talked to several longtime advertising guys in the industry that were going there. Their eyeballs on that scene and on that race in particular. And I think that exposure, the more of us that are watching it, we're scrutinizing it more than we ever have.